this event. My name is Ben Williamson. I'm with the Western County Green Party, and I want to do a little bit of housekeeping here and set up the evening, and I want to start by introducing our co-chair, Camille McCarthy.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's great to see all of you. This is only our second big public event, and so we're really happy to have you. So we are the Western North Carolina Green Party. We are a political party. We have ballot access in North Carolina, so you can register as a Green on your voter registration, and you can run as a Green in all levels of government in North Carolina. We only got ballot access last year, so we're really trying to expand and become a more major player in the political sphere. And the reason we're having this event, Reimagine the TDA, is because 2 years ago in 2017, we were canvassing for Dee Williams, who was our candidate that year, and we asked everyone that we met at the door, what are the issues that you feel are the most important in Asheville? And almost everyone said there's not enough attention being put into infrastructure, there's too much attention to tourism, and there's no affordability here, and there's no living wage jobs. So we think that having this event about the TDA will shed some light on all four of those issues, and hopefully inspire everyone in this room to get more involved in reimagining what the TDA could be. So let me introduce my co-chair, Robert Carson, who's going to explain the norms for the evening. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you. My name is Bob Carson. I'm the co-chair of the local Western North Carolina Green Party chapter, and we have a pretty filled agenda tonight. So we'd like to complete the presentation, and if people have questions, they can or would like to ask about a particular subject, they can raise their hand. I'll come around with an index card and pens, and you can write down your question, and we'll try to make sure that it gets dealt with. Please, we know this is a fairly hot topic, and we should try to maintain respectful interactions. And we will have sign-up sheets in the back, so you have an opportunity for continued discussion and involvement. And if anybody is truly interested, we will get in touch with them. So, yes. Ben?
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to start tonight with a presentation by Ms. Stephanie Brown, the President and CEO of the Asheville Convention Visitors Bureau. So we're just so grateful that Stephanie agreed to come and provide context to all of us. I think people are passionate about tourism, but there's misinformation, and I think people are confused sometimes. And I know I've been very interested in this topic, and I'm still learning every time I engage with the content about state restrictions, legal parameters, finances associated with the TDA, how those monies are allocated, etc. So we're so excited that she's going to present to start the evening. We'll have a couple other presenters before we get into the Q&A. So if you help me welcome Stephanie Brown.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Is the mic?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we had to kind of make a choice between you being able to see me very well or being able to see the slides very well. So we're going with the slides, but that also makes it hard to see my notes. I'm going to be a little more tied to my notes than normal because I have such a short amount of time. While he's getting the slides up, I wanted to share with you a conversation I had recently with a member of the Downtown Commission. We were having coffee, and he said, the problem is that the city is all bad about tourism, but you're always just all good about tourism, and we never hear any meeting in the middle. And it occurred to me in that minute that we don't have a chance to engage in those conversations very much. To admit the problems that we recognize with the growth of not only tourism, but workforce impacts and residential growth. So I really appreciate that you have invited me to be with you tonight. This is a sign that is on the door of our office, and I think it's really a good guide for tonight. I'm here with an open mind. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, and I trust that you're here with an open mind also. The Explore Asheville team is really proud of what we do. and the benefits for the community, but we also understand that there are problems associated with the growth of tourism. And it's going to take uncomfortable conversations to learn from each other and get to a place that's best for the community. I'm going to probably go faster than I'd like to, just for the sake of the time allotment, but I'm going to focus today on the legislative mandate that we are legally required to follow and the structure that has been established by state law, the community benefits of tourism, and then I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about our new tourism management and investment study. But before I get into that, I just want to say very clearly that we do not want to be Gatlinburg. Nobody in Asheville wants Asheville to be a place that's only about tourism. Maintaining the quality of life, the quality of our city for locals is maintaining the quality of city for our visitors. And we understand that it's critical to preserve, protect, and grow sustainably for the mutual benefit of residents and visitors alike. So a little history on the occupancy tax. Prior to 1983, there were no occupancy taxes in North Carolina, even though they were pretty common in other parts of the country, even in surrounding states. And so my early predecessor, a man named Dick Tremmel, actually had the idea to raise some funds for marketing and bringing outside dollars into the community for local businesses. And he kind of promoted that idea, and Buncombe County was one of the first occupancy taxes that were passed in 1983. The legislative perspective in North Carolina is that they're against singling out any one industry for taxation. That's why we're very late to have occupancy taxes in the state, and why there are only 3 meals taxes in the state today. Asheville was struggling in the early 80s, and so the idea of creating this source of funding to revitalize Asheville was kind of a big idea, and it was embraced by the local delegation, who at that time were all Democrats, and it was championed by Senator Martin Nesbitt. But it was passed with the understanding by the General Assembly that it would act kind of like a bid. Is everybody familiar with what a bid is? So a group of businesses says, oh, it's okay to tax us as long as it's for a particular purpose. And bids are typically controlled by a group that represents the people who agreed to be taxed. So the lodging tax is charged on top of sales tax. So when you stay in paid accommodations, whether it's an Airbnb or a hotel or vacation rental or a B&B, you pay 7% sales tax, and that goes where sales taxes go. And then you pay 6% lodging tax. It applies to all commercial lodging in Buncombe County, and it's administered by the BC TDA, and who are the representatives of the people who are collecting and paying those taxes, the lodging operators and the visitors. This is something that's really important to know. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this. Prior to 1997, that kind of legislative focus of tourism promotion was kind of being deviated as, additional occupancy tax bills were being passed. And so in 1997, the General Assembly the House adopted a set of guidelines that have been in place, and they are enforced by a subcommittee of the Finance Committee that specializes in these compliance with the guidelines for occupancy taxes. So you can see that they're pretty simple. The guidelines are that it can't be more than 6%. 2/3 has to be used for tourism promotion. There's a definition of what that means, and the rest can be used for tourism-related expenses that also has a definition and are approved by the TDA. So another kind of guiding principle of these guidelines is that the money is under the control of the TDA. So there are nine municipalities in North Carolina that receive general fund revenue as a portion of the occupancy tax that's collected. But all of those bills were passed prior to the adoption of these guidelines. They've been in effect now for a long time. To my knowledge, there's been one bill that passed that did not conform to these guidelines, and it simply switched the ratios. Your topic tonight of reimagining the TDA is, especially timely, because that's something that's happened throughout time as the needs of the community have evolved, and you'll see at the end that we're in a very big process of reimagining how our Tourism Product Development Fund works. So in 1983 it was passed. Soon after that it was raised a little bit. In 2001 was a really significant effort to raise some money for capital investment. Other communities who compete with Asheville for visitors were able to build things: convention centers, museums, performance halls, aquariums. And this community did not have that capacity. And so these hospitality leaders went back to Raleigh to increase the tax on their guests to provide a source of funding. Now this has grown to be the largest source of funding available to municipalities and nonprofits in Western North Carolina. In 2015, the tax rate was increased from 4% to 6%. The bill complied with the guidelines that were established. In 2017, the TDA created Explore Asheville as an independent organization. Prior to that, we were part of the Chamber of Commerce. We also that year offered paid advertising on exploreasheville.com and dedicated all of that advertising revenue to a grants program that supports local cultural events for their value to the community. And now, just 2 months ago, the board approved the Tourism Management Investment Plan, which we will get to in just a minute. So, the Buncombe County Tourism Development Authority is a public authority. Just like the Airport Authority is charged with operating the airport, the TDA has a specific public good. To be a public authority and use public funds, you have to have a public objective. And that objective is to generate income for local businesses, create jobs, and generate tax revenue. It's established by state law. And the TDA are volunteers who have particular expertise in tourism and sales and marketing and things that can benefit the success of the work that we are charged to do. What the TDA is not is a policy-making body, and it is not an industry trade association. But everyone who's on this board is legally required to follow the mandates of the state law that created that funding source. As a public entity, we are 100% transparent. Hayden was at our Holden,
Yes.
Everyone comes to all of our meetings. You can watch them all on Sunshine Request. We really appreciate the opportunity for people to be able to, tune in and see. We have a website for the community that includes all of our board materials, all of our research, our sales and marketing plans, any presentations that are given at tourism industry events. The Mountain Express recently praised our efforts as a model for transparency in the public realm. This is a section with our board. All of the board materials are posted either before or after, depending on the level of approval. So the legislation dictates how the money is used. 75% has to be dedicated to tourism promotion to state and regional and national markets to attract overnight visitors. 25%, as I said, is dedicated to product development. Every dollar we spend on advertising generates $43 of spending at local businesses and $3 in sales tax revenue within the 6 months following the campaign. And as the Product Development Fund, since its inception in 2001, has contributed $44 million to 39 projects. And I wish I had time to show them to you, but ranging from a lot of people really feel like this money should be used for infrastructure. And we call it different things. We call it placemaking. We call it public facilities. But a lot of this has been used to meet the infrastructure needs of the community. So, a lot of people, when you ask, what's the TDA do? Heads and beds, heads and beds. That's not really how we see it. We see it as a source of shared marketing that attracts a customer base to the community and enhances economic vitality. The Explore Asheville team provides free marketing services to connect visitors to those local businesses, and all of the services that we do, from marketing to PR to website listings to sales missions, are all provided free of charge to those local businesses. So this is the growth in basically what's been the operating budget that's been used for sales and marketing and promotion. And you can see that in 2015 and 2016 was a big jump, in part due to the growth in lodging revenues and in part due to the change in the tax rate. But the return on that investment has also been really significant. And So in 2009, visitors were spending about $1.3 billion. And so in the last 10 years, we're adding $1 billion more to the local economy. And that's money in the cash registers of local businesses. We've also generated an additional 5,000 jobs in the last 5 years. You might be surprised to learn that in Buncombe County, the only sector that pays higher than average wages is hospitality. Our 5 highest paying sectors pay 30% less than the state average, and that's a big impact on our average household income. And wages in Buncombe County hotels are 19% higher than average. So what I'm showing you here is, in the context, that $17 million, when we look at all governmental spending, because the TDA is a governmental entity, that comprises less than 3% of governmental expenditures. The TPDF program is about another 1% that's made available for community projects. So less than 3% investment is generating 31% of all sales tax revenues that are collected locally, and it's supporting 19% of property tax generation. And so this is where that visitor spending goes. And we say $2 billion, that sounds like a big number that probably has multipliers, and it's really not. It's an estimate of actual money in the cash registers of local businesses. And this is how it's distributed. So lodging properties collect 100% of the occupancy tax that's used for promotion. Food and beverage is the biggest beneficiary at $544 million, or 28%. Lodging receives 23% of spend. Interestingly, short-term rentals now are 20% of lodging revenue. So that's been kind of a big growth and an access point into the tourism economy. Recreation and entertainment is 14%, retail is 23%, and transportation is 12%. Of course, those businesses, I'm showing kind of a different representation in the pie chart. They all buy goods and services from lots of other businesses, and so visitor spending really benefits almost every sector of the economy. And you can see this red part of the pie of the wheel are business services, finance, insurance, and real estate, and that sector is actually a bigger beneficiary than lodging properties. So these are some actual visitors who shared their photographs with us. Our job is to attract overnight visitation to Asheville, and about 3.9 million people visited Buncombe County. That's a Buncombe County-wide number. 7.2 million day visitors visited, and I think it's important to understand that number. Asheville is our regional economic hub. So of the 7 million people who are visiting just for one day, many of them, a third of them are visiting friends and relatives. Many others are doing shopping. Others are visiting Mission Hospital or going to a doctor's appointment, or their kids are playing soccer or something else. When you add up the impact of 3.9 million people who are here an average of 2.5 days, and 7 million people who are here one day, times the people who work here every day, times the people who live here every day, this is about 11% of the people who are in the county at any given time. The people visiting Buncombe County spend $2 billion a year. As we said, that $2 billion of spend generates almost $200 million in state and local taxes. That provides resources for services and social investments that are important to the community, and it puts people to work. 18,000 people are working in tourism-related jobs, and 27,000 people in total are supported by visitor spending. I want to touch just briefly on this because it's really critical to where we're headed. The Tourism Development Fund was established in 2001. It's available for capital projects. And the legislation says that they have to increase overnight stays in Asheville. But the thing that's been beautiful about this project is we haven't built a convention center with it, where folks come into town, but residents never enjoy that facility. We've built sports fields and greenways and infrastructure, stormwater, sidewalks in the River Arts District. In total of $44 million. This is where I'll kind of wrap up. So we are now kind of changing the way we look at these investments. It's about $7 million a year now. This is a big change from even just a few years ago when we were doing an application-based process to allocate $1 million a year. And so the scope of benefit for this has the potential to be much greater. So this initiative builds upon the application-based process. It has to conform with the state law. But the cornerstones of the process are going to be a community-based engagement process with guidance from a community leadership council, other forms of public input, and collaboration with our municipal entities. So we're transitioning from an application-based process into one that has these three focuses. One is the community engagement, so that we can establish a nexus between the priorities of the community and the goals of this funding source. Collaboration with public entities. Instead of the city or county just sending an application in that gets evaluated and approved, we're going to sit down at the table to work together on how we can make these projects as good as they can be for the community. And we're also going to do a plan for at least 10 years or more, so that instead of saying yes or no to this year's funding, we can look at a larger time window to be able to say yes to more things. And I'm just going to end real quickly with some of the people, some of the faces of tourism. We come into a group like this and you're like, it's a little different than some of the folks who benefit from tourism every day, and I just wanted to introduce you to some of those folks. Here's Jen and Jim Lazan, owners of Lazoom, who said that they get to manifest their dreams because tourism provides year-round support and employment for entertainers. Farmers and restaurateurs are making a living from the visitor economy. This is Jess Thomason with Echo Mountain Studios, who says tourism has helped to sustain the local music scene. And there are a number of musicians who are able to survive because they're playing local weekly tourism gigs. And this is Kimberly Hunter from Mountain BizWorks, and she says she feels like Asheville's a dream city because of all the opportunities that are available. America Bio, who works at Biltmore Farms, Rosa Moore from Twisted Laurel, and this is Patty Torno from Curve Studios. And so, we're really proud of the work that we do to support such a wide range of people who are able to make a living through visitor spending and the visitors that we invite to the community. And we're really looking forward to the community engagement process and learning more about how we can do an even better job with people who live there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Brown. And then as I transition back to our PowerPoint, I do want to remind you kind of the format. It's a big deal for us, for the community to have access to Stephanie and to some of our elected officials, the members of our community that will be on the panel tonight. But in order to try to move through topics efficiently, we did want to try to get them on note cards so we can read them and keep everything respectful and let everybody, as many questions be answered as possible. So as I transition, if you have a question, anything that came up during the presentation that sparked a question to you, please raise your hand and Bob will come around and you can get that knocked out while we switch this over. Thank you.
Does anybody need your card or pen? I know they've got about 2 hands coming up.
All right, I'm going to push forward while we... I'm going to speak briefly and make way for some of our other speakers tonight, and I'm going to move without the microphone, and if anyone's hard of hearing, I want to be respectful of that. I will certainly use the microphone. So if you are having issues hearing me or any of our speakers tonight, just let me know and we'll address that. We want to make sure everybody can hear it. Okay? So Mrs. Brown mentioned the board, 11 members, 2 elected officials that are non-voting, and she mentioned the makeup of the board. They're appointed, as she explained. And you can see the business entities that they represent. So there's a lot of strong corporate entities that are represented on our board. And I think and she mentioned the structure, which I'll skip over, but I think just as someone who's not an expert, as someone that's active in the community, as someone that works in education, I moved to Asheville in 2001, as a parent of 2 daughters growing up in the city, a city that I love, we see needs in the community. When we volunteer, we see people that are hurting, we see people that are going without, and then we hear and read about the millions and millions of dollars that are coming through the occupancy tax. And they've done an amazing job raising Asheville's status, there's no doubt about it. And I think it would be hard to argue with some of the figures that Mrs. Brown displayed. But we also are appreciative that the recent steps that they're taking, recognizing that there are community needs that maybe we could be addressing in a better way through the occupancy tax funds. And we're so excited to be a part of that process. We want that process to be aggressive, and we want it to. We understand some of these things take time, but we're not going to be very patient because we still see these people hurting, we see people displaced, and we still see real needs in our communities, and we see all this money that maybe indirectly filters down to some of those issues, but we know a lot of it leaves the community. So we want to try to figure out how can we start that conversation to maybe reimagine how this entity works. What if our community had direct control over the dollars that our workers produce? She mentioned 3.9 million visitors come to our city each year, just overnight visitors. So if you knew their occupancy tax dollars were going to address, directly to address community needs, what might that look like and sound like? So this is a very simplistic and general view of one scenario of a $25.5 million revenue distribution. Our local transit budget per year is $5.5 million. So if we did 1 year, $25.5 million of occupancy tax revenue, we could double our local transit system's budget, which we know is deficient, which would help tourism and workers and families. $10 million to affordable housing would provide 50 units of affordable housing if each unit was $200,000, which is pretty good. That's 1 year. That's moving the needle on affordable housing. $5 million in education would provide at $50,000 per person, would provide 100 school counselors or social workers or before and after school workers, summer programming, teachers' assistants. I mean, that's incredible for a city school system that's facing, we're top 5 in the nation in racial achievement gap. Clean energy, $5 million. 200 rooftop units at $25,000 a piece. Again, this is very general and simplistic, but imagine how different our city would look in 1 year with that money. And then, well, okay, so what are you going to do? We're not going to advertise for tourism. Are we going to let down all these workers that rely on people coming to Asheville? And when you go back to that slide, it doesn't make sense to us that these private entities are going to leave their investments in Asheville unattended. Why not share the burden of advertising Asheville with these private corporations, or let them take it? Why can't we use that money to directly address people that are hurting, kids that are hurting right here in the city? So that's all I wanted to mention. I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, and he's going to talk for a little bit about some of the legal implications. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrew Kunza. I am the coordinator at large for the Green Party, member of the PSA, and just a generally dirty socialist. So, this right here is what we're talking about. It is legal framework from which the TDA works under. It is not a very scary law. This is pretty much it. I kind of edited it a little bit for clarity. But as we talked about, 10% goes to administrative costs. 3/4 of it goes towards advertising. The other 1/4 towards this development fund. That's pretty much it. That's the law, more or less. Now, the particulars are that the 1/4 cent to the development fund has to be for projects that significantly increase patronism in lodging facilities in Buncombe County. And the other 3/4 is just general tourism advertising money. I mean, it's General Assembly, North Carolina session, 2015 law. Real easy stuff. And I didn't even go to law school. So, I want to stress this, that tax policy is social policy. How money is spent affects people. What money is spent on affects people. It has material consequences. How laws are implemented affect people. So let's take a look at what the TDA has funded. So the majority of the TDA's money, 3/4 of it, does go for like general advertising. I won't go into the weeds with how the advertising looks because it's pretty much general sort of marketing stuff like this. Digital ads, print ads, stuff like this. But what's really important is who they are targeting with these ads. So this is from the TDA itself. So the advertising with millions of dollars behind it has a primary audience of people who are called elite empty nesters, prosperous and established couples who are making over $100K a year or have a household worth of over that, again, family segment, is adults 25 to 54, who make about the same. So these are people who are pretty affluent. National wage average is only $30,000. National, it's lower than that. So targeting extremely wealthy people, you can say, well, it won't have an impact on gentrification, but it's kind of hard to ignore that when your primary audience is people who are well above the national average for wealth and well above the local average for wealth. And also, it's not like rich people aren't known for coming to areas, hollowing them out, consuming everything, then leaving too. So bear that in mind too. They do have more social mobility too. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because again, it's all in their sales and marketing plan. It's pretty simple stuff to read. I encourage you all to read it. It's all on their website. But yeah, I'm going to check on because I don't have a whole lot of time, and also time is money, and I don't make it on weekend. But either way, this is what we got here. This is the things with the other fourth of the money that the TDA has funded. $500K grants to build some more zip lines for a zip line company. Also, Ken Stamps, he sat on the TDA board after he got his money though. I want to mind you after, not before. That sounds a little corrupt, so I don't want to make it sound corrupt. It's after the fact. After they got their money, they got to sit on the board. So yeah, so this is for Navitat. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Sorry, I don't speak Louis, but anyway. We got Highland Brewing too, who got $850K for building rooftop access, more event space, upgraded tour amenities, and also Leah Ashburn now sits on the TDA board. That's cool. But the other two things may be more palatable to you all, and they're really not that bad when taken at face value either. Because it's stuff like, hey, the River Arts District's got $4.6 million to fund infrastructure projects. And also, the latest round, 2018, is for the Inca Recreation Destination. $6 million to fund upgrades to this Inca facility. There's going to be a heritage trail, and there's also going to be some other things like more lighting at the Bob Lewis Ballpark. Now, there's a point to all this, and the reason why I'm highlighting this, because the TDA has shown that its past funding, even with its most current funding, that some of it can go to public use. Because I'm not trying to be smarky here, but it is one thing I want to point out. I don't know how many more beds are being lodged in Boca because Bob Lewis Ballpark has more lighting. So the law is a lot more vague and flexible than people may let you on to believe. Because again, I don't know what the measure is of this, but how many more beds have to be sold? Because I don't know how many people making 6 figures want to go to the ballpark and check out the lights. So, with all that said, let's take a look at what other cities have done, because we can be ambitious here. So, Portland, 83% of all of their general occupancy tax goes towards funds to address community priorities, and the remaining 17% goes into tourism marketing. Nashville, 16.6% goes into their public transportation. Seattle, 37.5% into affordable housing. Vancouver has affordable housing and empty homes tax. But as we all know, North Carolina is different. It's a scary state. It's a Dillon's Law state. It's a Mother Two state. You can't do a lot of things because Raleigh's really mean. Well, let's take a look at some other counties' TDAs. So Ashe County, 1/3 of it for travel and tourism. The other 2/3 goes to general fund for any public purpose. Bald Head Island, theirs is to promote tourism-related activities, but also expenditures that are included with tourism-related activities, like criminal justice system, fire protection, public ties, utilities, healthcare facilities, solid waste stuff like that. It's all highlighted for you. Banner Elk, which in 2002 changed how it worked. Basically, they still have the 2/3 to promote tourism, but the other third goes to tourism-related expenditures that are geared towards their downtown area, to have more green areas, make it more accessible and usable for pedestrians. Cleveland County, they can use their occupancy tax for any purpose. Town of Columbus, 50 to travel, 50 for any public purpose. Hyde County, any public purpose. This goes on, here's some more. Caldwell County, for economic and industrial growth. Chapel Hill allows spending on non-tourism functions, and also their city council controls the funds, which is pretty cool. Dare County, services and programs needed due to the impact of the tourism economy. Brunswick County, tourism-related expenditures. So, as was noted earlier, all this may have been passed before 1997, except the Banner Elk one, but also it's state law. It ain't the 10 Commandments, it ain't the Constitution. This is not written in stone. It is not an impossibility to change these laws. And also, too, we always talk about how punitive Raleigh is. It's going to come down hard. There's multiple counties who are still operating with these laws, and Raleigh ain't going after them. Raleigh ain't demanding they change their laws. So, I don't see why not. We can't be more ambitious. Because it just seems like every point when we're facing like a legal hurdle, the argument always is it's too hard, it's too difficult. But there's plenty of other counties that are operating just fine under Raleigh's strict supervision. So like a lot of issues with neoliberalism, and in general with like a lot of class issues, it's more to the point to actually try to like highlight the laws and say we want this going. And I don't see why it's too much to ask. It's a very simple law that we're fighting against, and it's not too complicated to understand. So I think that's my time, so thank you all.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm excited for our next speaker, Matilda Bliss, who's here with Showing Up for Racial Justice, and recently published an article in Asheville Blade about this topic. So please help me welcome Matilda.
Hey everyone. So I personally, guess with Showing Up for Racial Justice, originally moved to the area 5 years ago. Ran out of money, which is the usual situation for a lot of people I hear here having to move away because they run out of money. Went back to where I got my degree. Was able to come back the next year after a year in Knoxville, and in 2016 entered the racial justice movement here. The week before Jerry Williams was killed, and so by a police officer here, Tyler Radford. When I actually formally joined Showing Up for Racial Justice, I was told to be part of the D. Williams campaign for City Council that Camille mentioned, and heard a lot about the TDA on there. And finally, after the police attack on an unarmed black man in August of 2017, via release in March of 2018, I went to a TDA meeting May 3rd, 2018. It was a very, very interesting scene there, which I'll get into a little bit. So, some of what's going on.
Sorry, keep going. I'll fix it.
Some of what's going on. So the city council, they had kind of unofficially put a hotel moratorium on in October, and it had been a few months, and the owner of Milan Hotel Group, Monarch Hotel, came back with his proposal and actually was able to get the necessary support to get his hotel approved. And that happened again a few weeks later when Al Sneeden's Family Lodge Hotel was pushed through also. Very interesting breakdown on how those votes went, which is all online. But definitely just wanted to go through about some of the multinational corporations that are involved here in Asheville, and some of the figures that we have on some of these folks. So for instance, licensing fees to Marriott, which is $23 billion company, and that Monarch Hotel is licensing. His company, Milan Hotel Group, is licensing, for instance, a courtyard, which is $75,000 up front, and then each year the gross room revenue is 6%. Very, very interesting that matches the occupancy tax that's leaving Asheville. 2% on food and beverages, that definitely exceeds what we're able to make off of the folks who rent hotel rooms here. And then we have other infrastructure needs that are coming at us. Traffic. There's often the excuse used that we need more police because we have all these tourists here. So, infrastructure needs millions and millions of dollars that otherwise could be Hotel Group won our hotel licenses through 5 different companies, and that's those companies all together bring in revenue of $35 billion each year. So he's very much like diversifying across the spectrum of hotels here. So this was let through on promise of $500,000 to the Affordable Housing Fund over 5 years. And so, yeah, lots and lots of hotels. So we have 52 multinational hotels of 52 hotels that are linked to multinational conglomerates here, at least. Those are not necessarily going through every single hotel. There's probably more. But that was what I was able to come up with. And for instance, Crown Plaza has 274 rooms. A hotel like Clarion has 69. By the end of 2019, 9,400 hotel rooms, most licensing from outside corporations. So we're looking at this and all the royalties. Of course, this isn't counting the application fees. At least another 20 million probably leaving Asheville each year. And these are not the only set of corporations. For instance, Sierra Nevada is a $2 billion corporation. Anheuser-Busch owns the Orange Peel. Lots of other major alcohol companies. You have the airlines. There's been some articles about the amount of major airlines that are operating out of Buncombe County and how much money that is also leaving Asheville. So we have definitely a situation of not just, I mean, there's definitely people that are doing well, but there's also a lot of people who don't live here who are doing very well, and folks who are doing way better here than they should be. So we have, what about wages? So there's a little bit of a misleading statistic that hotels employ only 5% of the people in Buncombe County who earn less than $12 an hour. But doing some math, I found that 123,000 workers in Buncombe County, that's how many folks work here, and then hospitality is 4,812, which is 3.9% of the workforce. So 3.9 versus 5%, that means that if you're working in hospitality, you're 25% more likely to be making less than $12 an hour. And then we have a 15% unemployment rate without tourism, which is often touted. But we also have like Asheville, which is has 3 times the unemployment rate of the rest of Asheville. And for instance, I worked in a Starbucks and an Ingles, and I had several coworkers who, making $8.50 an hour, would after work was done, they would go and sell their plasma. So they would be counted in the employment part of that equation, of course. So we have a good jobs crisis, according to economist Robert Wright, where it's not that a lot of people are employed, it's just that they're not able to make ends meet on that income. So one huge part that I want to get to is how the history of tourism and segregation are very intertwined. So we have, this is from Urban Renewal in Asheville, a really great read, very required read for anybody who's moving here. So within a year, shoddy commercial buildings, ramshackle residential property, and scrubbing undergrowth, which means so looking at communities that were affected by redlining as eyesores, and using that as reason to undergo a huge urban renewal project in Southside, the neighborhood just south of downtown. So we have a timeline energy for this. Great Depression, World War II, people are sidetracked, and then once the economy's recovered and there's lots of policies that happen in between this, there's a referendum to bring urban renewal to Southside, which actually fails. It fails in March of that year, and then city officials bring it back. That's how much they wanted this in the same calendar year, and they were able to corral support for it to pass using some very sketchy means, which is in the article. So then, in the lead up, it's time to begin, or again, after a 40-year hiatus, tourists would make it a destination. They would not just pass through Asheville, they couldn't resist staying in the city we're planning, no matter who's kicked out. So, largest urban renewal track in the southeast, more than 1,100 homes, 6 beauty parlors, 5 barbershops, 5 filling stations, 14 grocery stores, 3 laundromats, 8 apartment houses, 7 churches, 3 shoe shops, 2 cabinet shops, 2 auto body shops, 1 hotel, 5 funeral homes, 1 hospital, and 3 doctor's offices. So devastation, and that was definitely not the only neighborhood. We live in the second fastest gentrified city in the nation. So $1,800 in tax relief, which is also touted by the group. Average rent in Asheville was inflation adjusted $186 in 1985, goes up to $910 in 2009, and today it's $1,234. Minimum wage has gone down. Minimum wage was $7.79 an hour, adjusting for inflation 1985, down to $7.25 today. Living wage is $13.65, and of course, if you're working in hospitality, you're probably not able to make your ends meet. APD budget is just $1 million less than the tax contributed to the city, probably. It's unsure how exactly those numbers are calculated. It's kind of interesting to look at. But yeah, the money is not necessarily getting routed in the right places. And then we have the racial disparities that, of course, have been talked about quite a bit, including the achievement gap and home ownership rates. State of Life Asheville is, I know I'm probably at time. Yeah, the TDA meetings, creepier, it's going to get creepy, it's going to get creepier. Just the Google Analytics and just folks going through that and seeming to have dialogue that might not be necessary. It's not considered maybe the best things to just be talking about with people who have been frustrated by not being able to make it here, you know? And then giving APD all the tools we can was mentioned in a May 31st, 2018 TDA meeting, and this was in reference to written consent to search, and that is the Chamber of Commerce president. And then going on, also said, who's really homeless? It's a drug issue, a needle exchange issue. And of course, not even 3 months later, City Collective and Firestorm are given notices of violation that were later rejected, but put community groups through a lot of frustration. And also said, doesn't make downtown a nice place to go, just not a good situation. A lot of people downtown getting out of correctional facilities. This is at a organizational meeting which controls $23 million in tax money that a lot of workers work really hard to generate. And so that's when the TDA meetings are. And I think the next part is solutions, so I'm gonna jump off here.
So just a reminder, in case you came in a little late, we're about to transition to the question and answer period. We're very excited to have some elected officials that have been nice enough to join us tonight. So our format for that is if you have a question, if you'll just write it down on an index card. Bob, if you have a question of anything that's come up in the last couple presentations, please raise your hand. I have it. Bob will hand those out. Just jot your card down and hand them to them, and we'll get to that here in a couple minutes. So I think Camille's up for going forward. Yeah.
So we've heard a lot about what the TDA is, what it's done in the past, but not a lot about what we can do to change that, which is why we're having this meeting here. Number one, elections. We're the Green Party. We have ballot access. If you want to run for any office and make changing the TDA part of your platform, we are happy to talk to you, happy to help you get set up. Then we have TDA, council, and commission meetings. You can show up to those meetings. They're public meetings. They might not always be at the most convenient time, but they do have public comment sections of the meeting. And you can go up and say what you, like, you can share your experiences and your ideas at those meetings. We have a sign-up list on the table in the back for a TDA work group. We want to not just have this meeting and then all disperse. We want to actually keep in touch with you and discuss how can we make our city better? How can we get these funds into the hands of people that really need them? How can we improve our infrastructure and address these problems that we face for so long? Our next meeting of the Western North Carolina Green Party is on May 15th, and it'll be in the room right next to this at 6:30. And we can also support worker co-ops. Worker co-ops share the profit of the labor that the workers put in, and they're the most sustainable business model according to many economists. We have the French Broad Food Co-op, and we hope that in the future there will be more worker co-ops here because we desperately need them. We can take legal action. If you've heard of the Community Roots Group, they are trying to get on the ballot a referendum for 100% renewable energy by 2030. That petition is also in the back on the table. So if you are a registered Asheville voter, you can sign the petition. And they're expecting if we do get that as a legally binding referendum, there will be legal action from Raleigh. But instead of just saying, okay, we're just gonna not try, they've also contacted the CELDEF group. I think it stands for Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, which is a legal defense fund that actually helps people in communities make community benefits agreements and also community bills of rights, such as the one that is proposed. There's also direct action. I saw a few people on Asheville Politics last time the hotel got approved saying, why don't we have pop-up tickets in front of these hotels on opening day? It's not legal. Why don't we do something like we could have a beer boycott? There's many things you could do. We just have to work together because we can all sit by ourselves and grumble about the tourism problem and watch our city as those who live and work here get poorer and poorer. Or we can come together and try to figure out what we can do to make a change. So thank you everyone who has come out tonight. It's really a pleasure to see everyone. And thank you to all our speakers and everyone who's agreed to be on our panel. And I will hand it over to Ben.
All right. Thanks, Camille. So our bottom line, again, just going back to regular people that live here and work here and love the city, we just feel like we don't feel like we have a lot of control over what happens with this money. We feel like the control is in the hands of corporate interests. We know indirectly a lot of these monies that are spent come back to the community. We also know a lot of that money leaves the community, which has been gone over. And we just feel like these dollars belong to the people of Asheville. And we don't feel like the people of Asheville are necessarily controlling where those dollars go. And so we just want more control over the money. We're so excited potentially to work with the TDA in a serious effort to have that conversation. I think this evening tonight is a positive step in that regard. And the structure of the TDA, reduces accountability. If these dollars were publicly handled, if they were in the general budget of the county and or the city, how our elected officials chose to spend that money we could agree or disagree, but we could hold them accountable the next election. We could have that conversation. If they felt like those dollars should be best spent with marketing and PR, then that's a conversation they get to have, and they may be right, they may be wrong, but we get to decide to hold them accountable. The way the current structure is, we can't vote people out of the TDA board. We can't really even express our discontent with the current structure. It feels incestuous. It feels like these are private entities controlling public dollars, and we're just kind of beating our head against this legislation from Raleigh. And that feels wrong. And we believe, we're here in Asheville, many of us, because we feel Asheville can be different. And it is different, and we love it because it's different. So we don't want to play by, we don't want to just accept rules that we feel don't benefit the people of our city, especially when there's so many needs here. So that's why we're here, and thank you so much for being here. I do want to mention, if we haven't already, the Sunshine Request is filming this. So if you want to pull this up online later after the evening, or share this with people that couldn't come, please go to their website and like them on Facebook and support everything they do, because they're a great local resource for transparency. We have some free vegan brownies in the back before we transition from vegan roaming. So if you have any vegan catering needs for your event, please support them that supported us tonight. And then real quick before we transition, I know there's a Green New Deal forum coming up with Sunrise Movement. Ashley, can you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm working with a local youth-led climate justice group called the Sunrise Movement. It's part of a national effort to lead a mass socioeconomic and environmentally led movement behind the Green New Deal. We are having a town hall a week from Saturday at Rainbow Community School from 5 to 7 p.m. So I just wanted to plug that, and I'll leave some flyers back there. But we're really excited to talk about what the movement is behind the Green New Deal, how we're working with local people in the community that are working on transit and housing development and unions and all that good stuff. And we'll announce our panel later this week. And I appreciate the time, so just support them.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for the work Sunrise is doing. All right, so I'm going to invite Stephanie to come up, and I also want to introduce Judy Mayfield, who's on our city council. She's also on the TDA board as a non-voting member. She's recently announced that she's running for North Carolina Senate, District 49. She's also the co-director of Mount True. And Brownie Newman is here, our Buncombe County Commissioner. And then to add a perspective from disenfranchised and minority communities here in town, Pancho Bermeo has agreed to be on the panel. Beloved, from Beloved Asheville. You know that amazing organization. They do a ton of work in various ways in town. So if you have any questions about how those populations locally may be impacted by tourism, please feel free to direct those to Pancho. I have a large number of index cards here and more coming. So I'm going to run through these as quickly as I can. We have to be out of the building at 8, which is an hour from now. So I'm just going to ask our panel, when a question comes to you, if you'll address it as efficiently as you can, try not to belabor so we can get as many points heard as possible. Questions that we don't get to, I will type up and send to the panel, collect those, and I will send those to all the emails that are on the sign-up sheet that came in, and we'll make sure that those get answered as best, respecting everybody's busy schedule. So please help me thank these folks for coming and being on the panel, and we'll get started. One mic, you can speak loudly or pass it down. All right, question 1. Would the TDA support a legal restructuring of the occupancy tax, i.e. flipping the ratio given the obvious successes of increased tourism in recent years?
What I was trying to make kind of clear by that foundational information is, the things that we have mandates that have to be followed according to state law. As a public authority, we're legally obligated to work within that mandate. And so we are making strides to. I guess to go back to for a second, the way that money is currently used. I appreciated the emphasis on the Tourism Product Development Fund and sharing 4 of the 39 projects that have been funded. A great variety of others have. 3 of those were law was changed to eliminate the use of grants for for-profit entities to focus on municipal and nonprofit grants. Just this year, we also funded renovations to the YMI and African American Heritage Trail, $100,000 to a museum at Stevens Lee. So I think that's just kind of a precursor for the opportunities that we're trying to pursue with this community engagement process to plan the use of those funds within the mandate that we have to follow for years to come.
Can I just add to that? So I've been on the board now for 3 years, and I think the way that I would answer that question is that today, no, I don't think the board would advocate any change to the tax. Partly, and this is what I think Stephanie's saying, is that the TDA board is not, they are not a policy advocacy group. That's not their job. Their job is to manage the money. So advocacy around the tax, I think, has to happen somewhere else. I will say that with the planning process that Stephanie talked about, where for the next year, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for community input, coming up with hopefully a 10-year sort of plan of projects that will be municipal, city, and county projects. My guess is that list of projects is going to be so big and so long that we're all going to realize at that point, I'll just say this is my hope, that we're all going to realize at that point that the money that is coming into the TPDF is not going to be enough. And that we can then have a real conversation about whether it makes sense at that point to shift the percentage a little bit. But today, I think that if that didn't happen in 2015 when there was a real reconfiguring of the legislation, it's not going to happen now, and it's certainly not going to happen with the current legislature in place. Now, this current legislature will probably not be in place in a couple of years, but that's what I would say to that right now. I think it's not a now thing, but it's not a never thing in my mind.
Yeah, just to say a few more kind of words about that, because there is I think the entity of the TDA gets a lot of attention. It's this official institution that exists in the community, administers all these funds that have been talked about tonight, but it is not synonymous with the tourism industry in Asheville and Buncombe County. Obviously, there's a lot of representation from the tourism industry on the board as per how the legislation is set up, but it doesn't, exactly represent the perspectives of the tourism community in our, in Asheville and Buncombe County. And just to kind of share a few more thoughts about what that sort of looks like, because the industry itself is obviously very interested in all of these issues and very involved in it. Back in 2015, when the legislation was increased from 4% to 6%, there were a series of meetings between local elected officials and the city council and county commission and members of the tourism industry in the community. Some of those folks are probably involved in TDA, maybe have served, but there were a lot of folks involved in those conversations who are not TDA members. And, not all the elected officials had the exact same view, and I don't think all the people in the tourism industry had the exact same view either. I would say it's fair to say that most of the folks on the city council and county commission had the perspective that we would like to see the hotel occupancy tax increased from 4%, which is where it was at the time, which is actually well below the state average for most of the larger cities in the state. We'd like to see it increased, and we'd like to see a healthy percentage of the new funds invested in infrastructure projects. And because for a long time, the view of the tourism industry had been that they were happy with where it was at 4% and did not want to increase it. But there was a sense that maybe there was a time, maybe a chance for an opportunity to change it. And at that time, most of the folks in the hotel industry did decide to support the increase. But of course, where there was disagreement was about the percentage that would be spent on marketing versus infrastructure projects. Originally, when the bill was introduced to increase it, it was going to be 100% for marketing. And in the meeting when one of our local tourism leaders announced this, people were really upset about it and pushed back very hard. Ultimately, the legislation was modified so that 25% of the additional funds would be spent on infrastructure. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to share a few more thoughts about some of the ways I see these kind of issues playing out. Because the TDA is an important institution, but again, there's a lot of things that happen in the tourism industry that are above and beyond what happens at the TDA meetings itself.
Thank you. This is for Pancho. In your view, what are the biggest impacts on homeless and minority citizens as a result of the city's focus on tourism downtown?
I was listening all the presentation and I was thinking, it's a lot of numbers. I was thinking, yeah, woo, we are doing great. And later I saw these people are very happy people. And I say, what is happy people? I never see happy people. I never see local people happy like these people in these pictures. So, and the story that I know, the stories that I know, is like a youth that is 17, then have 2 jobs in downtown, and he have to sleep in the streets. Because if he rent a house, he need to live outside of downtown, and he don't have a car. He's 17. This is the stories that I know. And I know a lot of the people, usually people ask me, what is the Latinx people in downtown? And I always say, they are working. We are the people that make the hotels. We are the people that clean the hotels. We are the people that make the food in the restaurants. We are the people that clean the dishes. Only you never see us because we always working in the shadows of downtown. So the hard part for me is a lot of my friends or a lot of the people that I know, they park 12 blocks from downtown because they don't want to drive to downtown. Because it's over-policed. This is downtown. So imagine this. Last week, a community theater donated 20 tickets to myself, and so I invite 20 youths, Latinx youth, to enjoy the show. And a lot of the parents say, I don't want, if you can came for the youth, because I don't want to drive to downtown, because I'm too afraid to drive in downtown. So when you are talking about cultural events, and when you are talking about all these amazing things happening downtown, these things is not for, I don't think that is for us, for the local people. I think that these events is for tourists too. And a lot of the advertising, you are very smart. You were saying why we know advertise less and use this money for public transit? Why we know advertise less and we use some kind of deal for local people have a place to park? Because even we can park no more. We need to park 5 blocks from downtown if we want to come to downtown. So it's a lot of struggles. I don't see really. I like the presentation. Was a lot of numbers, like I said, I don't see really the benefits that we have of all these tourists, because 6 years ago that I came to this town, I came walking downtown and I see a lot of faces. Then I know. Now, this is the first time that I see a lot of faces that I know in downtown. This place is only for tourists, it's a tourist attraction, it's not for local people. And now that I can see them is the buildings and the hotels is going to West Asheville. I start seeing the people is moving to Marshall or to Westville, so they work here and they need to drive 30 minutes every day. This is insane. So I think that my purpose here is I'm more like a community member, and I saw a lot of happy faces there, and in my community I don't see a lot of happy faces because we are the people that is making the solutions in the ground. We are building houses now, like with Claire, we are maintaining this garden in downtown, so we are making our own solutions because we don't see really that the city is supporting us better for really enjoy downtown, all this amazing downtown, and all this amazing thing of Asheville, we don't see really that we can enjoy all this attraction. It's more for tourists.
One thing to that, so can't argue with any of that, but a year ago at the TDA board retreat, it was kind of a watershed moment where we were, the board was asked, what are the top 3 issues facing Asheville in the next few years? And so, these are the board members, so these are the people who run those hotels, the people who, you've seen the list. And the top answers from those folks were the same answers that you would give. It was transportation problems, it was affordability issues, because, as Pancho just said, it's the people who work in their businesses who are living 30 minutes away. It's the people who work in their businesses who can't afford to live in town. That breaks down. So I don't know, maybe kumbaya is too strong a word, but the moment was when everybody sort of realized, wow, there is for me, what I observed was an alignment in a way that I had never seen before between leaders in our tourism industry and what I hear from people on a daily basis. That these are our problems, we understand these are common problems, and we have to start working together to try to address them. And I think, that is part of where I think this plan that the TDA is embarked on has come from. It is a recognition of that. And Asheville is not unique in this sort of, I would say, growing frustration with tourism and with tourism management agencies like the TDA, sort of recognizing that, we need to be helping to contribute to solving these problems. This is a trend that is happening all across the country. So I want you to understand that I think there is more alignment than you think there is between what your concerns are and the concerns of the people who sit around that table. The question is what to do about it, and whether the tax and doing something with the tax is the answer to that problem, and then even if you think it is, whether that's actually politically possible to do. So that's kind of the way my brain chews on.
All right, maybe for Commissioner Newman, how will we moderate the impacts of over-tourism and its impacts on the features that draw people here?
Well, I think there's there's two parts to it. A lot of the discussion tonight is around the hotel tax, right? And it's generating a ton of money, as has been talked about tonight. And there's this debate about how it should be utilized. It's not a new debate. It's been around for a long time. When I was first elected to Asheville City Council, and actually when I first ran for City Council and didn't win that time, this issue was actually one of the main issues that I campaigned on. And because I thought that at that point the tourism tax was 3%. In many other cities around the state, I think we're at 6% or certainly higher than 3% at that point. And I thought, this doesn't make sense to me. I mean, Asheville's always been a tourism town. It never made sense to me that tourists would not come to Asheville if we had a slightly higher hotel tax. It just didn't make sense to me. So it sort of just felt like, as a community, we're just kind of leaving money on the table, right? These people are going to come anyway. Let's get them to help pay for some of the things that the community needs. So I was an advocate for that at the time. And, and it was not that long after that the tourism industry went ahead and increased it from 3% to 4%. And that 1% increase was all dedicated to what's it's referred to as product development, but another way of thinking about that is infrastructure. So, this is not a new conversation. It's one that's been going on for a while, and there's always been, differences of views on this. I think what's at stake is different now, but because although we've always been a tourism town, just the growth of the industry has been so significant over the last few years in particular that it's just, it's a much bigger deal now than it was, 15 years ago. So I think part of it is the land use, the discussion about the tax issue, but there's obviously also the land use part of it. Most of those issues have been falling on at the city council level of decision making lately. When I served on city council, there had not been a new hotel built in Asheville for years and years, or very, very limited. So we're at a kind of totally different level of growth now, and the city council is the jurisdiction that's responsible for that. So the county commission has really had very few of those same kind of hotel, controversies that the city council has had to face with. I think as these things continue to grow, that might change. We might see more, in areas that the county has jurisdiction over. But those land use questions have been mostly more of a city issue in the last couple of years.
We don't have very much time tonight to talk about this planning process, but I want you to understand that we're concerned about the quality of downtown for the people who live here too. And that, it's not going to be a place that's successful for tourism if it is not a place where people live and work and congregate and have community. And so, part of this process, the biggest part of the process is to, kind of have a community conversation around prioritization. And then look at strategies that we can employ to, solve some of those problems to sustain the character of Asheville. Asheville's not a tourism destination, it's a place where people live that other people like to visit. So I'm sorry we don't have a lot of time to go into that depth, but I encourage you to, go to we have a TMIP website at ashevillecvb.com/TMIP. You can sign up to get notices, so you'll know to come to community meetings. You can participate in those workshops and help prioritize those needs and plan for those investments that help to address those problems. And I completely agree with Julie that once we have a community-endorsed list of priorities, some of them will be infrastructure needs that can be funded with TDA money. Others, we may say, there's other mechanisms and opportunities to raise money that can be used to solve these problems. But I think the first step is to be a community and have these conversations as a group and get to a set of priorities that have some agreement.
For Mrs. Brown, what implications does the TDA consider when it attributes value statements like elite to customers based on income? Does the TDA consider poverty to be a character flaw? Does it understand how a mindset like this can contribute to gentrification, racism, and displacement?
Yeah, I totally understand how those words are interpreted outside of a marketing plan. The process is simply that, we look at the characteristics of people who are likely to visit Asheville. The elite segment is not the only segment that is marketed to and are not the only people who visit. It's just simply a way that media gets purchased. These are terms and labels that are identified through, the resources we have to purchase media. It's not a value judgment. It's not assigning these are good or these are not good. These are just descriptions of the people who are most likely to respond to advertising and come and spend money at local businesses. And that $2 billion that's characterized as trickle down, that is in the cash registers of local businesses. Most of our hotels are actually locally owned, even if it has a Marriott on the side. It's a family that owns that hotel and is employing more local people. So I totally understand how that is interpreted by folks who aren't part of that conversation. It's just simply a standard marketing term that's used by everybody who purchases advertising anywhere in the country.
Those terms are really unfortunate, and for the last 3 years sitting on that board, I listened to them and I cringe, and I even challenged, what was the word I challenged last month? I can't remember, but it was basically saying, there's some people who are in, and then that necessarily means there are other people who are out. And I basically said, that is a terrible way to talk about this. And again, the answer was it's marketing. Here's the other answer, though, is that this advertising was going to be geared to people who would appreciate Asheville. And so Asheville has, we're a super progressive town. I mean, this is the Green Party thing, so let's just call it out, right? We don't, people who don't appreciate the LGBT community probably shouldn't spend a lot of time here, people who aren't interested in celebrating the African American history that is going to be celebrated more and more, they probably don't need to come here. We are interested in people who come here and want to reflect the values of the people who are already here. And that's not everyone, and that's just a fact of it. So the marketing is geared to people who are not going to walk down the street and cringe when they see people of the same sex holding hands. That's not what we want.
So, while we're certainly going to have differing opinions on this issue, I am grateful that our elected officials took time to be here tonight and answer our questions. So, I'm gently going to ask that we be as respectful as we possibly can for the remainder of the evening. And again, if we have questions and follow-up, we can schedule another forum. We can get your names and organize something. We want this to be the first step of the community's involvement, or one aspect of the community's involvement in this conversation going forward. We don't want it to go away. We want to keep the pressure on to let people know that we're serious about reimagining the TDA and how these monies are spent. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being respectful as people are talking the way you would hope that they would be respectful if you were up there. All right, maybe Mrs. Brown, the TDA granted $9.5 million last year in product development funds, and that's 25% of funds. Wouldn't the revenues generated equal nearly $40 million versus the 23 million?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do our marketing budget on a fiscal year, so we estimate how much revenue is going to be generated in that fiscal year, and then we're obligated as a governmental entity to have a balanced budget. The TPDF is on a different cycle, and so those funds are typically awarded in October. So this year, because we were embarking on this new planning process, we did kind of more than a year's worth of funding that was allocated to that set of grants. And so this year's, the 75% was $17.4 million. And then another 25% was accumulated into that fund. But that fund grows based on when the money is received and then can be dispersed.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally about $6 million a year.
It's about $6 million a year.
That's what.
Okay, thank you. I just received this one. How many African Americans or minorities work on the staff of Explore Asheville BCTDA?
Our staff is, has to have a particular skill set. We're a relatively small group. We have actually embarked on a series of kind of educational opportunities. About 10 of us went to the Forum on Equity that was provided by Leadership Asheville, and following that meeting, had kind of a debrief and decided that we need to learn more, and we need to participate in those conversations. And so since then, we've had a series of organizations come in and talk to our group. We've all taken the Hood Huggers tour. We've been working really pretty closely with members of the community on these grants that we've been able to provide support for projects that are really important to the African American community. So the answer is that we're a team of 26 people, and we currently have no African Americans on staff, but we are dedicated to serving the needs that we can in those communities.
We've heard that the TDA serves as a public entity. What actual access does the public have in TDA decisions, both its members and its use of the millions in the TDA budget? And I would just add a follow-up that how can the average minimum wage Ashevillean be involved in the next year of discussions, specifically?
There are several ways to be involved. One is to sign up to get notices on the website. There's a feedback loop. There will be a community sentiment survey that will be available to everybody. We will have the meetings at a variety of different times. I totally get it. It's really hard to give up time like you all are giving up tonight to be part of this conversation. So there's a variety of different ways to participate. But it's open to everybody. The Community Leadership Council is comprised of about 50 individuals who represent other groups. Many of them are representing city commissions. Elected leaders are on that group. But it's open to everybody, and anybody who wants to come will not only sit in a room and watch what's happening, but they'll get to participate in the same way that those community leaders are participating. I know that you specifically mentioned a person that has a couple of jobs. So our meetings are at 9 o'clock. You can watch them live stream. You're also always welcome to show up. We take public comment at every meeting. I'm available. You invited me to come, and I'm here, and and we do that whenever we're asked.
Do you feel that the 9 to 11 a.m. slot is conducive to average Ashevilleans to be able to come and listen?
I don't think there's any time that's perfect for everybody. We have a lot of events for tourism partners too, and restaurant people don't like mornings, and other types of jobs don't like afternoons or evenings, and so we certainly will plan for the public engagement parts of the new planning process, to offer times throughout the day and evening.
Okay, I guess this could be for our elected officials. Is there? It says as the CDB, but I guess we could to ask our policymakers or elected officials as well. Is there a limit or max standard to consider regarding tourism in ABO? Meaning, is there a line of diminishing returns where we simply have too many hotels and tourists and it starts to take away from the experience of those visitors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I got elected, I specifically asked to serve as the liaison to the TDA because I was sort of where you guys are, and I was like, this is a terrible situation. This cannot stand. And Marla, I remember, and I think you were in this conversation too. I spent most of the first year, just listening and trying to understand because it is really complicated. But at some point I said, I think we need to have a conversation about Asheville's carrying capacity for tourism and, how at some point it's just going to be too much. And if Tuesday night becomes like Friday night, we will have failed, utterly failed at keeping this place a place that people want to live, right, and are able to live. And so I started looking around for, who can do these carrying capacity studies? We talk about, in the environmental world, we talk about the carrying capacity of an ecosystem, and there are people who can study that. I couldn't really find anybody who studied the carrying capacity of cities from a tourism perspective. It happens in really isolated places like Yosemite, or a couple of national parks. But for a city, and we have to remember the TDA is county-wide, so it's not just the city. I couldn't find anybody. I mean, I spent a long time looking at this, and so then I thought, well, maybe that's not the answer. Maybe it's really more. Maybe we should really be looking at sustainable tourism, and how do we make sure that tourism isn't wrecking our city and again wrecking the quality of life for people who live here. And so then I started looking for companies that did these kind of sustainability assessments. And there are a few more. They're mostly, again, not for mature tourist destinations like ours. They're mostly for, very fragile ecosystems that have a growing tourism industry and they don't really want to screw it up. So, I found one thing that seemed to make sense, and I brought it to a couple of board members, and they were like, "Yeah, this is not quite right. It's not really going to fly." And then that kind of led into this conversation that I mentioned at the board meeting last year, where and believe me, the TDA board is well aware of the anger that is out there and aimed at them. They are aware of that, and it is bothersome to them. So we have had very frank and open conversations about that. And as I said, in that last year at the retreat, we sort of got to this place of, this city, this community has problems. This board probably has some role in solving those problems, and we just got to figure out what that is. And that, again, I think was the first step in getting to this planning process that we're in right now. So the answer to your question is, I don't know. And I don't know that there's anybody out there who can help us know what the carrying capacity of the city or the carrying capacity of the county is. But it's, we can do better, and I think we are on a path to get there.
I think it's a very legitimate question, and again, most of these issues have gone to the city council, not the county commission that much. And honestly, I think when we look at the larger region in Western North Carolina, there'd be a lot of places in Western North Carolina that could probably really, in ways that probably most everyone would agree with, would it be beneficial to have some additional tourism there. I think part of the challenge that we have here in Asheville is just, is this question about when is it too much for the heart of Asheville? Because that is where this explosive growth is happening, and it is really changing the community in some dramatic ways. And at what point, as Stephanie said earlier, we don't want to be Gatlinburg, and I don't think we're ever going to be Gatlinburg. But at what point are we beyond where we think the balance of what tourism should be as a component of the economy is just too much? I think that's a very fair question, and I think it's it's a question that they're probably maybe for special national parks and stuff there are experts on that, but I think for us it's just more of it's a political process, and it's forums like this, and it's people talking to elected officials where we will make these decisions. I personally think that, you know, I really sympathize with city council dealing with all these different hotels after another. You know, you know, in my mind, if we feel like that tourism is grown beyond what we want to see it as a component of the community, I think the best thing for us to do as elected officials is just to vote to do that, to say, look, if we think there's too many hotels in this area, let's have a policy to make that clear. And that way you don't have these people going out spending tons of effort and money with all this uncertainty about what's going to happen. So I actually think just making clear decisions about, like, we have enough hotels in this part of our community for now, and maybe in a few years we'll check back in and maybe we'll change that policy. But I think those are very fair questions for local government to make.
I'd just like to add that there are a few things that we can do, you know, to help manage the capacity issues of congregation. One are urban planning, you know, and design strategies. And so our consultants who are urban planners and architects are working with the city staff and the planners in those departments to spread people around. We can make investments to make downtown bigger, to, you know, encourage people to go to, you know, streets that aren't populated as much. We also can, you know, market parts of the county that do more tourism and experiences outside of the core of the middle of downtown. So, you know, there are strategies that we're focused on, and many of them can be solved with investments in infrastructure.
This question is for Pancho. How have you seen police interactions evolve since the tourism has increased downtown?
Like you were saying, it's more Afro events. I was thinking, like, yeah, we can have a lot of Afro events in downtown. Only who of us is gonna come to this event? I don't think that the Afro community is gonna come to this event when it's over police, because I am the same afraid with the story that happened with Johnny Rush. There is a worker that came back from work to home. I'm the same afraid to walk in the night, and then the police stop me for any reason. So for me, since this happened, the police haven't stopped me like 5 times over the time that I have been here. They stopped me for the pictures, they stopped me for drive my bicycle, they stopped me because I have paint in my clothes. So for me, having interest, all this, like, one day I was playing music in Patriots Park, and Tuesdays they have this hip hop, so I used to go there and play guitar and jam a little bit there. So one day I was there until 9:50, the people that do hip hop is moving to one bar, and so the police stopped, but besides us, there was only Afro people and Latinx people, and they waited until 10:03 to down from the police car and give us everybody a ticket, because we was trespassing in Patriots Park. And because I enjoyed to be in the drum circle, next Friday I went to the drum circle and I played there and we stayed until 11 o'clock. The same park. The only difference is that in Tuesday we have only people of color, and in Friday you have people, white people. So for me, I haven't seen that. And all this for me signals and tell me, you're not welcome here, why you back here? So I'm gonna give you a ticket every time that I see you. Even that I have been living here in downtown, all the time that I have been in Nashville, I have been living in downtown. The police, I think, they're always is pushing me away. And the more that they push me, the less things that I'm doing here in downtown. Because before I was involved in different art projects in downtown, music, art, paint, and different stuff. Only now I try to avoid the more than I can downtown. So I think that it's working, because we don't see a lot of people of color in downtown. No matter, like you're gonna see in the 5 de Mayo, then it's people celebrating this, the student they think that is the Mexican independence. I go to all these bars and it's nobody of us, because we are afraid to go to these bars. Even when we work in these bars, we are afraid to go and enjoy the stuff that is here, because this stuff is not for us. This stuff is for people that came from other places. Because like I say, local people like myself, no feel safe coming to downtown or living downtown in late night. So I think it's, like I say, it's over police for all the stuff that I haven't seen. I'm more from 3 years and now having like increased hardcore. Then I say, like, I don't come no more to downtown. I came because it's close to my house. Only I try to avoid the more than I can downtown.
Great. We have about 10 more minutes, so we'll, and this is also for Pancho. How do you feel about the claim that targeting families with over $100,000 yearly
6% of the hotels and all this money. I was thinking maybe it's time to start doing reparation, because if we know, and we know, I know that we know history, and we have a big place here that talk about Ashby history, and all this was Afro wash houses here of the Afro community. So maybe it's time to start doing reparation, and also all this money for these families that lost their houses in Montfort. Maybe it's time to also this money for that reparation and start helping people of color to be in college, because they lost a lot of opportunities with all these things that happen when the city start taking all the property from the Afro community. So maybe it's time even for do reparation.
Is Ms. Brown aware that hospitality is some of the lowest certified living wage employers in Buncombe County? How is this sustainable? What is TDA doing to look at this in equity? Sorry, is that what you're saying?
You know, I think that a couple of things. One is that, you know, many of the entry-level jobs that are available in this community are not tourism related. I know it's easy to think of it that way. I know it's easy to think that like all retail is tourism. 80% of retail is driven by local spending. Restaurant jobs, you know, a lot of the plethora of, you know, the lowest paid jobs are in fast food and other things that are primarily driven by local spending. You know, I think that some of these jobs provide great, you know, ladders of opportunity. I know, you know, people who are working in hotels who started, you know, in the back room and ended up being able to get free education, you know, through their employer and are now at a front desk or now in a management position. And those are not as infrequent as you think. So, you know, I think that there's a starting level and then areas of opportunity, but you know, the lowest paid jobs in this community are not really all driven by tourism. You know, they're a function of the local economy at large.
And I guess we'll just open this for whomever. Do you believe hotel tax dollars belong to hoteliers or to the people of Asheville and Buncombe County? If the latter, why does the TDA deserve to exist?
Well, the TDA is a function of state law. State law has directed that the TDA would administer the occupancy taxes as they were created to generate, you know, money from people who don't live here to come into this community. The community benefit is, like I've been saying, you know, more revenue that support our local businesses that in this community are mostly local. They're locally owned. They're the dream of the people who wanted to have that comedy bus tour or that outfitting or that coffee shop or that restaurant or that B&B or, you know, on and on and on and on. These, you know, it's a source of easy access to a customer base that had made, you know, it possible for people to start businesses, whether you're an artist or a musician or any kind of job. So state law directs that use. The community benefit has been, you know, that we have a lot of independent businesses that are able to survive because of the revenue that comes from these people from out of town. They're employing 18,000 people and they're generating tax revenue. So, you know, if you took that source of tourism spending, you know, out of the economy, you also lose a lot of tax revenue that is also available to pay for services and social issues. I think, you know, one thing that we could agree on is, you know, that we all want a good community, a prosperous community for all people. Those are really complicated problems with complicated answers. And so, you know, our job right now is to, you know, follow the law as it's, you know, intended to be. I think that, you know, the community benefit is widespread and, you know, and appreciated by, you know, a lot of people who depend on it.
So Stephanie's right. Right now, under the law, the TDA is the governor of those funds. For good or ill, whether you agree with it or not, that is the fact of it. As we said, the law can change. Doing a full frontal assault on the law right now, or probably even in the next couple of years, would be a massive fight that would likely be extraordinarily unsuccessful with this legislature. That is also, in my mind, just a fact. So the way I think about this is if we want to go have a fight at the legislature about how to get more money into this community, this tax is actually not where the bigger dollars are. The bigger dollars, the biggest dollar that we could get would be a food and beverage tax. Sales tax on food and beverage sales, not groceries, but when you go out to dinner, when you go to brewery, that sort of thing. That would help us capture tourism dollars in a way that the occupancy tax will never do. And the revenue to the city, if we could get that, well over $10 million a year. That's the fight that I want to have if we're going to have a fight with the legislature. The other fight that we can have is for a dedicated transit tax, which at this point is only authorized for the county to do. I personally don't want to fight to do another dedicated sales tax in the county right now, but what I would love to go to the bat for at the legislature is a dedicated sales tax dedicated to transit here in the city. I think it would pass in a heartbeat. I don't even think we'd have to advertise and ask people to vote for it. And again, that would bring in millions of dollars that would dwarf, in my view, whatever little shift in the occupancy tax we might be able to make. Now again, in 3 years, in 5 years, we could be having a very different conversation about the occupancy tax. But right now, if I'm going to go to the legislature to fight for something, it's going to be for much bigger dollars than we could get by shifting this tax. That's what
I would, just a couple of thoughts. One is, I would encourage people who are interested in this issue to spend more time talking to your state legislators and your county commissioners. I think the city council hears about these issues a lot, and probably every single member of city council has a very well-developed opinion. They're not all the same opinions, but they all have, very specific views about this because they hear from folks all the time. I think the county commissioners hear about these issues a lot less, and I think the state legislators, who actually are the only ones who have the ability to change any of the things we're talking about now, probably don't think about these issues that much because they don't hear about them really too much. They go off to Raleigh and do things, but they're not hearing about it as much. And we saw that back again in 2015 when there was actually the last debate about increasing this. I think we saw that. I think the members of city council fought really hard to try to change the way the increased tax funds would be spent. I was on the county commission at that point, but I'd been on the city council and I'd been very interested in these issues for a long time. So I also, was like, look, this cannot look good at marketing. And the legislators, I think they were looking to us as local officials, but they clearly, again, I think had not thought about these issues nearly as much as the local officials had. So talk to the legislators. They are the only ones who can change the law as it exists today. In the one place where we did have a chance to actually kind of make a definite difference on this at the local level, when the bill was passed in 2015, it actually required local approval by the county commission. I was actually shocked. I was like, you mean we actually get to vote on this? I've been interested in this for years, never actually been able to vote on it. So it went to the county commission, and it passed by 4-3. And there were very few people in the room that night. So for all of the kind of like drama this issue creates for good reasons, because it's important, when we actually had a chance to make a difference on it by a vote of our local county commission, it was approved by 1 vote on a 4-3 vote. I voted against it, Holly Jones voted against it, Miranda DeRule voted against it. I don't think I agreed with her about anything except this one issue. But anyway, so it was passed on a 4-3 vote. So there are periodically times where local folks need to get involved, but I really do think it's city council that, most of the all these development activities are happening there. They hear about it, but a lot of other places where folks who have a voice really don't hear about it that much.
All right, thank you so much. Just in the interest of time, and we have to clear the room and we want to respect the library, I'm going to stop us here. If you have other questions that have come up that we got 20 or so that didn't get asked, feel free to give them to me and I will pass them along to our presenters. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for coming tonight. Please help me thank our panelists again.